While I don't like New Year's resolutions, I do like goal setting. I think it helps clarify my purpose and intent and what I'm going to do every 3 years, 1 year, quarterly, and weekly so that I know what I'm doing every day is building towards my long-term goals. So what I'm going to do in this video is show you what I do at the beginning of every year and what I go back to on a quarterly basis so that you can work on building your own long-term goals. Let's get into it. What I'm showing you right now is a Word document that functions as my long-term planning tool. It's not fancy. You'll notice I didn't even bother to save this one. It's just document two. But this is what I work around. I pulled it out of a book called Traction, where what they say is look at 3-year goals, then you build those 3-year goals, pull them back to 1 year, quarterly, and then weekly. So that what you're doing is you're looking at where you want to be 3 years from now, and then you're tying it back to what you do on a daily basis. So starting with 3 year, what I did a couple things here. One, I listed out some ideas that you could use for your own personal planning, but then I also put my goals. So it helps when you're making goals for them to be specific, measurable, and attainable so that you don't feel like you're trying to set out to do something that can't be done. That said, I'll also say it's very helpful to use a framework of thinking about trying to 10x instead of 2x. I'm pulling this from the book. 10x is easier than 2x. Here's the core concept. There's a lot of ways that you can double over time. There's very, very few ways that you can 10x yourself. And what you find is that if you stop and you think about how am I going to 10x myself in any one of these goals, you'll find that you have to get very, very specific about what you're doing. You can't say, so if we're focusing on sales and we're focusing on sales numbers and net worth and annual income, you can't say, well, I'm going to sell to contractors and wholesalers and manufacturers and truckers. You find that you say, oh, actually, I need to focus on contractors. And more specifically, I need to focus on plumbing contractors. And maybe even more specifically, I need to be the best at workers' compensation for plumbing contractors with more than 25 employees. And I need to do that over a wide geography. And I need to be known as the one best stop to get this done in this region. And then you can pull that back to what you do on a weekly basis to build towards that long-term goal. So I'm in my mind, I'm talking to salespeople in these videos most of the times. So that's why I tie it back to net worth and I tie it back to annual income because net worth is a function of how much you make from an income perspective and then how much you can save. So this is not personal finance, but I'll tell you, you should make sure that you're setting aside a good chunk of money. Pay yourself before you go buy stuff. And when I say pay yourself, that means set money aside into savings accounts, not just retirement plans. But for me personally, I set money into my E-Trade after my retirement planning every month. And it's because that money is there for doing things like buying cars and buying houses and paying for kids' college. I want that money available and not impacted by taxes. Anyway, some other things that you can look at in terms of goal setting is if you've got aspirations to own a business, your position in the business, growth of a department, if you run a specific department, if you got family goals. So I got 2 kids. I want my kids to be able to go to any college that they want to go to. And I also want them to feel like I'm here and available and I'm a good dad and they can trust me. And then I want to have a good spiritual life because I've found that makes a big difference in my day-to-day attitude. And then community goals. I've been thinking about this recently. None of us live forever. And I think it's interesting to think about what would it take for my name to be remembered 100 years from now in Frederick, just my hometown. I don't need to be Elon Musk, but how can I make an impact in my local community and the people around me so that what I do lives on past my time? So here are some of my goals. I want to increase in 3 years. I want to increase my net worth by 50%. I want to increase my annual net income by 50%. I want my family to feel like I love them and I'm available. That's not really measurable, but I do think that you have to tie that back to the amount of time that I invest in them. Because here's what I've learned. I heard it on a podcast and it was very, very real to me. You cannot schedule special bonding moments. They either happen or they don't, but you have to be around long enough for those moments to occur. And they usually happen in weird moments. So, like, I was in Disney World recently, and for me, a good bonding moment was walking with my daughter through Epcot on New Year's Eve. And she's jumping over dark colored tiles and it's so crowded you're basically shoulder to shoulder with people the whole time, but there's Christmas music going off and people are excited. To me, that's a moment I'm going to remember for forever, but I had to be there in that moment, right? That's the idea. You have to make sure that you're allocating time so that the people around you can feel like you're there, you're available. And I talked about building a community legacy. So putting those goals on paper, now I have to take a step back. It's like, okay, I want to get to 50%. What's the first year? So stair step into each of these goals. Personal net increasing by 50% is about 15% every year. So I'm going to aim for an increase of personal net worth by 15%. And I want to increase my net income by 15%, which means I need to increase my book of business by 15%, which now we're talking about how do I back into what does my call volume need to look like? But we'll get more into that in a bit. So 15% on each of these. I need to have daily time for my family. And I need to be thinking about how do I build a long-term legacy? And maybe that is board involvement. I do think in terms of every year, I like to try to add one class of business to my repertoire just to keep broadening myself out. But I try and stay so that it is right next to something I'm currently doing. So I've written a number of mission sending organizations. I want to write international nonprofits now. So I already have the expertise of what's it look like to write something that has operations in Liberia and South Africa and Haiti. Now I'm just talking about picking a nonprofit that doesn't have a spiritual component to it. So looking for NGOs. Remove one thing that I think will not contribute. I'm going to write less blog posts. I'm going to focus on videos. That's my idea. Now, when I make these videos, I could take the transcripts. They make for excellent content for emails. They give me ideas for LinkedIn posts. It's just that I'm not going to focus on the idea of making sure I have blog posts for my personal website. I'm going to focus on making sure I have videos for my YouTube channel because I want to grow my YouTube viewership by 2x. I got about 3,000 views this year. I'm pumped about that because I went into the year, I didn't know how to edit a video. I didn't know what equipment I needed. I didn't know how to upload anything to YouTube. I didn't know what a thumbnail was. So for me to get to that point, I'm incredibly proud, even though I know I'm just a drop in the bucket for YouTube. But I want to double that because long term, what I think is that video is going to be the way that people can connect with each other. And I've seen that and I've felt that with the videos that I have recorded is that when I talk to somebody, whether it's another producer or a prospect or a customer, and they have watched the videos that I've recorded, they feel a connection to me. There is a level of comfort and trust that is not there with a blog post or an email. It's just different. It's even better than if they take a cold call from me because they see my face, they see my body language, they watch me communicate. So I'm focusing on YouTube and video as my primary form of communication. So what does this mean I need to do if these are my goals from a quarterly basis, from an annual basis? What do I need to do quarterly? I need to have savings goals, which I'm not going to tell you, but I have them. I need to have sales goals. And so my target is $150,000 in revenue. I've only done that once in my life. I want to do that again, but I'm going to go for $150,000 in revenue. And so to do that, there's a couple things I need to think about. I need to make sure that my minimum account size is high enough, and I need to make sure that I have a large enough pool of prospects to call into. So, because only about 3% of your buyers or my buyers are really going to be interested in talking about what I'm selling at any given time, which means I need a large enough pool to pull from. That's part of why I like to add one class of business every year that's close or tangential, because it helps steadily grow that pool of prospects that I can call into to increase my chances of getting the revenue that I need. I think it's about time for me to think about getting involved with the charity. And then I like the idea of building a personal foundation, whether it's this year or some other time in the future, but that's how I can make my money last long term. And then associations, I'll tell you personally, and the way that I have generated new leads has typically been through cold calling, cold emailing, and then content. I have not been good at associations, but I think for where I'm at, which is I have roughly $1 million revenue book of business, I need to be leveraging referrals and I need to be known as the obvious choice. Now, it's great to have inbound leads from content. It's a wonderful thing to have, but I also need to be steadily focused on making sure that my customers are telling their friends about me, because that is how I've gotten into some of my largest and best deals over time. Now, some of it I can't control. Some of it starts with an inbound lead. Like I'll tell you, 2 years ago, I got an inbound lead through the agency website for a nonprofit children's home in Florida. That nonprofit's children's home referred me to another for profit children's home, which I also wrote, which referred me to another for profit children's home in Florida. And that's just kind of how it goes. It's part of why I'm not always hard and fast on minimum account sizes, even though I know there's a limit to how many customers I can manage. But I think there's real value in having a volume of customers within a target class of business. Now, maybe in your agency, that's not as big a deal. Maybe you already have, if you're working with plumbing contractors, the agency already works with 1,000 plumbing contractors. So there's that volume. For me, where I'm at, it helps. I'm the primary producer for some of these classes of business, which means I need to build volume. I need to have name recognition, need to have enough volume of customers so that they'll refer me to other places. So what does this look like in terms of weekly goals? Now that we've tied it from 3 year to 1 year to quarterly, what do I need to be doing every week? I'm putting out 100 cold calls a week. It's a little bit on the low end, but I want to focus more on videos. I want to make sure I have daily family time and daily prayer time. But I also, some other things to put in here would be number of qualifying conversations or presentations. See, these are things that are measurable and attainable every week. So I think that a good number is 6 qualifying conversations a week. And then in different places, I need to be tracking average account size. What I've found over time is that I can write about 40 to 45 accounts in a year. It doesn't go higher. I can't make more calls. I have a book of I have a list of customers I have to take care of. I'm running out of time. What I have to do is have to make that each minute be worth more. So instead of working on $10 value tasks, focus on $50 tasks or focus on $100 tasks. Now, I've also found that it's really hard to jump from $10 to $100 tasks. So that's why we do this 3 year, 1 year, quarterly, weekly, because that helps gradually over time stair step yourself into where you want to be. And this is the process that I go through every year. And then I revisit it quarterly to make sure I hit my goals. So it's what I recommend to you that you should do here in 2026 so that you're going in the direction that you want to go. Hey, Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. I respond to everything. If you want to schedule a call with me, my contact information's going to be in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Please go build something.